Hi, I'm Bailey McChesney from Vanderbilt University's Owen Graduate School of Management, and you're listening to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions podcast.
Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, December 1st, 2025. Looking for an MBA experience where you're truly seen, supported, and inspired to grow? At Vanderbilt Business, you'll discover a personalized learning environment that elevates your potential and turns ambition into action. Whether you're switching careers or accelerating your current path, the Vanderbilt MBA offers a customizable curriculum, exceptional outcomes, and a community committed to your success. Propel your future with a program invested in who you are and who you're becoming. Vanderbilt is waiving their $200 application fee for MBA Wiretaps listeners. To learn more about the Vanderbilt MBA program and to claim your application fee waiver, visit business.vanderbilt.edu/clearadmit. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. Alex, December, I can't even believe it.
Yeah, no, it's we're marching along. We're marching along.
Yeah, exactly. So what's going on though? Because right now, we just had the Thanksgiving holiday last week, and all of our listeners are, I think anyone who applied in round one is sort of probably waiting for news. And so are there any big decisions coming, or do we still have to wait another week for most of them, or what's going to happen here with round one?
Yeah, let's be real. We're recording this on Thanksgiving Day.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, that aside, actually last week we saw some activity on Livewire, Stern releasing decisions, London Business School,
I saw, and
so forth. And this upcoming week, we've got several schools actually scheduled to release their round one decisions. That's Goizueta, Tepper, Carroll, Boston College, Carroll, Booth, Yale, Ross, SMU, Cox and Georgia, Terry are amongst top schools releasing decisions. And we'll see that over then the next couple of weeks. More of the top schools are now ready to roll out those final decisions.
Yeah, and I saw not this week, but the one after is really crazy. I mean, I think there's one day where there's several M7 schools all jammed into the same day. So it's going to be crazy couple of weeks here. Our fingers are crossed for everyone that's waiting on news. In other news, this week's also busy from the standpoint of events. I'm going to MC 2 events on Tuesday and Wednesday at noon Eastern for Masters in Management programs, more for the undergrad crowd or people with just like a year or two of experience who want to do a master's in management. But on Tuesday, I'm going to catch up with Carnegie Mellon, Georgetown, INSEAD, Johns Hopkins, and Michigan. And on Wednesday, I'm going to sit down with admissions directors from Chicago Booth, Emory, LBS, Northwestern, Kellogg, and UC Irvine. So that should be fun. Alex, we also planned our next live stream, which is going to be right after all these decisions come out on December 16th. So we moved it up because of the holiday, the Christmas holiday. So we're doing it pretty soon at noon Eastern on December 16th. So we'll see, maybe we'll get some news from all these people that have been tuning in and joining us for those Ask Me Anythings.
Yes, very good. Best of luck to them.
Yeah. So we have a couple of interesting articles that we've run. We're still kind of waiting on schools to issue employment reports. I know Harvard just released theirs, but we're still waiting on the vast majority of top schools to kind of get the data out on the class of 25 and where they landed. But in the meantime, we've kind of revisited some of the stats we have. So we did an article about big tech hiring. And, that sort of underlines the fact that, big tech hiring had come down a bit for the class of 24. But I want to see if you remember this, because I know you've read this article. What are some of the schools that send the highest percentage of their grads into tech jobs?
Tech jobs generally, highest percentage. Well, Tepper might come to mind.
Yeah, they're number 2.
Number 2. I got a feeling that Haas would be high up there.
Yeah, they're number 3.
And what's number 1? I've got a feeling number 1's a smaller program. I'm not recalling. Yeah,
it is. So number 1 is Foster at University of Washington.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, they're on the doorstep of Microsoft and Amazon. So that makes sense, right? And then
which is a double-edged sword. right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because, if you read any of the press lately, Microsoft and Amazon have been laying folks off in large numbers.
Yeah.
So maybe Seattle is a bit of a depressed employment market currently. I don't know. And it'd be interesting to get the perspective of Foster's folks on what's going on and how that directly impacts. Because obviously they're heavily weighted towards tech placement and a tech experience and so forth. So if there is a shrinking in the tech sector, they're going to be quite vulnerable.
Yeah, agreed. Although I do wonder, of these, when I read about some of these layoffs, it's unclear if they're sort of the MBA grad type positions or if they're other positions. I think obviously it's across the board in some regards, but yeah, it'd be good to find out. And we'll see certainly in the upcoming career reports as they come out. The fourth school in terms of percentage is Anderson at UCLA. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I was thinking in LA school too.
Yeah.
So I if I'd have thought hard about it, I could have come up with that.
All right.
I mean, many folks would be like, well, Sloan or Wharton or whatever, but because they're larger class sizes, they probably send more folks into tech. But as you asked for the percentage.
Yes. So, okay. But what about overall volume? If you had to give me a couple of schools that are biggest in sending people into the tech companies in terms of the number of students who are going.
I'd probably look at Wharton.
Yeah. So Wharton's number 2, Harvard's number 1, Kellogg 3.
Harvard, yeah. And again, it's a function of they're all M7, they're all large programs.
Yeah, and Booth is number 4. So again, those are probably the 4 biggest MBA programs, right? That makes sense.
Yeah.
Same thing on venture cap. So one thing that's interesting, we looked at finance, and so I was kind of curious if which schools send the highest percentage of their grads into finance, and this is everything: investment banking, private equity, venture capital.
Johnson.
Yeah, they're number 1. Highest percentage.
I picked a winner.
And then it's interesting. After that is Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. So those are the 4 schools that send the highest percentage. But then again, what about by volume?
So we're just talking finance generally, or
finance general.
So in terms of volume, again, then I'd start looking. Well, if you said Harvard's already, I'd look at Harvard and Wharton.
Yeah, so Harvard's number 1, Columbia's number 2, Wharton 3.
Yeah, Columbia, sorry. I forgot about New York.
Yeah, and Booth is 4. Now, what's interesting, though, is as you point out, we sliced this differently, looked at, okay, which schools send the most people the most students by percentage into private equity, venture capital, and investment management. Those are the more coveted roles sometimes. And that's Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. And if we look at that by volume, it's Harvard, Wharton, Columbia. So those are, so there are some differences, but again, you're hearing some familiar names coming up over and over again with finance.
Yeah.
We also did a piece about, so London Business School hosted the 15th Eurout conference, EUROUT, and that's Europe's leading LGBTQ conference. We did a profile. There's a woman named Sheena who's a LBS MBA student, class of 27, and she was on the organizing committee, and she takes us inside that conference and, just takes us through what it was like hosting that and everything. So that's an interesting piece up on the site now about this conference hosted at LBS. We also posted a couple of admissions tips, Alex. One is about video essays, something that's becoming increasingly important. We talked about, why schools are using these. We talked about authenticity and English language skill measurement, as well as spontaneity. So those are all things that we discuss in this article. And we also provided a video with a whole bunch of tips that you and I recorded as part of our Admissions Academy. That's all up on the site and free, and people should certainly watch that if they're getting ready for a video essay.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then the last thing we did is we did a piece about how to kind of go about doing really high quality MBA program research. So we just talk about, how do you build these anecdotes and find those advocates on campus when you talk to students, alumni, and faculty. So that's up on the site as well. These are relevant, I think, for people starting to work on those round 2 applications. So keep that in mind. We also, I don't know if this was on purpose, but Lauren shared over the last week or so 3 Real Humans pieces where we connected with students from IMD, IESE, and Cambridge. So 3 of Europe's better MBA programs. And so I just wanted to share a couple of little nuggets from those. So we start with IMD, where we caught up with a woman named Rand, and she's 35. She is from Erbil, Iraq, and she studied at the American University of Athens in pharmacy and has been working at Eli Lilly for like 9 years. And so we asked her, like, what is her initial impression of the IMD kind of students, the culture, the community? And she said, IMD is super collaborative, diverse, and welcoming. The best part of the program is the people, both the cohort and the faculty. There's a genuine openness to learn from each other and push one another to grow. The culture is less about competition and more about creating an environment where everyone's challenged to become a better version of themselves. One thing that surprised me is how much the program emphasizes self-awareness and personal reflection throughout the year alongside academic requirements. And I've heard that over and over again, by the way, Alex. But that's Rand from IMD, and sounds like she has a pretty interesting background.
Yeah, no, I love that feedback about IMD. It's a smaller program, right? It's quite
very small.
Yeah. So I think with these smaller programs, they can really go after this sort of more sort of nuanced approach and so forth. And, this is an older candidate, and that's quite interesting too, I think. Some of these European schools tend to be more open to older candidates and so forth. They're from, did you say Iran? Iraq, sorry, yes. So, yeah. Again, US programs would love to see that sort of level of diversity that European programs tend to be able to affect.
Yeah, absolutely. I love reading these. So we then went over to IESE, which is in Barcelona, and we talked to Maria Nicole, and she's also in the class of 27. I guess Rand is in the class of 26 because IMD is a 1 year, whereas IESE is a 2 year. Maria Nicole is 30, and she's from, it's funny, she lists Melbourne, Australia, and San Francisco, California is where she's from. So I suspect she kind of has lived in both places. She went to UC Santa Cruz, studied literature with high honors and minored in education. Okay. So for 9 years pre-MBA, because she's already 30, she worked, I guess she initially trained as like a teacher, but then she worked in PR, communications, and content strategy for tech companies. And she, we kind of asked her, well, why did you make the decision to go to business school? And she said, everything I knew about business, I learned on the job. It felt like my turn to go back to school, back to the beginning, to have time to process the last decade, to unlearn and relearn my foundations and find out what's on the other side. It's a privilege to return to the classroom with real work experience and real world context, especially now. I believe we're living in the zeitgeist. This is an interesting time in global political, technological, and economic history to exchange ideas with peers and experts from over 60 countries to shape my understanding of the future of global markets. So Maria Nicole has, and no doubt she works in PR and communications because that is super well written.
Yes. Yeah, but also super interesting. What a great perspective. And again, it's coming from an older candidate, not quite as much experience, I suppose, as our previous, but still an older candidate with lots of global perspective. I'm presuming they're originally from Australia, went over to California at some point and had a significant career in California, then coming to Europe. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I just want to be on the record, Maria Nicole, if you're listening, I did not say you're old. Alex did.
No, boy. 30. Well, yeah, she's half my age, so I'm not sure I could really call her old. Yeah.
No, I'm just joking. But and then the last school that we touched base with was Cambridge. So again, all these great European MBA programs. And we caught up with Catherine, who's in the judge class of, I guess she's going to be graduating in 2026. Yeah. So they're a 1 year as well. She's 32. She's from somewhere called, I'm going to butcher this, Alex, Gloucestershire. No, Gloucestershire.
Gloucestershire. Not Shire. Sure.
Okay. And she studied, you're going to love this, theoretical physics as an undergrad, and then has a master's in precision engineering as well, and a PhD in applied physics. So she had worked as an R&D engineer, actually in Cambridge at a climate tech startup based in the decarbonization industry, pre-business school. So pretty interesting candidate, Catherine is, I would say. And we asked her, like, what would you do again as part of your application process? And she said, I would not be afraid to proudly state achievements. We're often taught to tone down how we communicate our successes, especially as women. But for me, it was useful to take a step back and appreciate all I've achieved so far in my life. When writing examples of how I showed leadership or solved complex problems, I realized I had more depth of skills and experience than I initially thought. Putting these into words felt awkward at first, but listing my achievements helped boost my confidence in my application and showed the unique value I could bring to the program and my further career. So that's Catherine from Cambridge. Is that like sort of rocket science?
And what an impressive background. I mean, crikey. This last weekend, I watched a 3-hour, I shouldn't exaggerate. Maybe it was a 2-hour podcast on the developments of fusion technology, sort of in the nuclear space. Mm-hmm. I needed this candidate to interpret it for me. It's a super interesting space, and maybe that's something that they're exploring, because obviously on the climate side, we need free energy, and that's basically what fusion technology might be able to provide in the sort of short to medium term, not certainly tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I love hearing these. I know our listeners, hopefully everyone enjoys kind of hearing these little tidbits. And obviously, if you like this, you can go to the website. We profiled several students at each of these 3 MBA programs, so you can go read more about them.
And it's not to say that to get into a top European program, you need to be a slightly older candidate who's female. It just happens that those are the ones that Graham selected for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, that was totally unintentional. I just kind of go through and I quickly pick out ones that kind of jump out the page at me. And these all 3 seemed really interesting. Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get into this week's candidates is that Harvard Business School has released their class profile for the class of 27. So I'll get into it, right? So we've got, they had 9,409 applications, and that ended up yielding them 943 matriculants. So you can do the math on that as to how hard it is to get into Harvard. Now, last year, they actually had 9,856 applications, so more than 400 more apps last year than this year. And they ended up with 930 students in the class of 26. So that's kind of interesting. The class of 27 is 44% women. It was 45% last year. It's 37% international. That's up 2 percentage points from last year. Academically, the cohort remains strong. Undergraduate GPA averages, 3.76 versus 3.69. The test score medians, we have a 730 on the old GMAT and a 685 on the GMAT Focus. They didn't report Focus last year, but they did report the older GMAT, and that was a 740. So that came down a little bit, although we have to remember things have been shifting a bit, as they get more Focus scores and more GRE scores. Speaking of the GRE, the median GRE score was a 328 total combined score. It was 326 last year, so that's up 2 points. Work experience is nearly identical, 4.9 years on average for the class of 27. It was 5 years of work experience for 26. So overall, from where I sit, it looks like they continue to be pretty darn selective with a very diverse and academically strong class. But what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, these stats are very good. Obviously, you might argue slightly less applications. To me, that Harvard is the bellwether for the size of the MBA application market for all schools. So if they dropped, I just think that means there were slightly less top tier candidates in the pool last year. Assuming that makes sense. One interesting statistic that you pulled out there, though, Graham, is the increase in international students at 2%. I think that's absolutely fantastic. If we remember all the issues that Harvard was facing during a time which would have been heavily a time when, admissions decisions are going out and Yale numbers start coming in, and can these international students come? Can they get a visa? Can they do this, that, and the other? Well, kudos to them. So they seem to have navigated what was a very problematic period of time very well. And Harvard was at the center of that issue.
Yeah, no, very impressive. So we'll see. I'll be very curious to see how these numbers look this year in terms of application volume. I know we only have, first round is behind us and round 2 is always a big round. So we don't know yet, but I'll be curious to see how this shapes out over time. One last tidbit is that some of you may have seen that an episode of the show popped up in the feed here last week, a bonus episode that we did with UNC Keenan Flagler. I talked to the associate dean there and a current student about this program they have that's called the Vetter Dean's Fellows Program. And it's basically, their MBA program is a small program. I think it's about 200 students, and the Vetter Dean's Fellows is like 20 students that get put into this special program. You do have to kind of apply for it. It's when you apply to the regular MBA, you just sort of have to tick a box and write an additional essay, but it's a pretty cool kind of sub-program within the MBA because you get extra kind of leadership, executive coaching. They take you on like an international trip that's funded, to a business trip. And actually all the students in this program get some level of scholarship as well towards their MBA. So anyway, it's an interesting episode, where I talked to the one of these students that's in the program as well as the associate dean. So check that out. It's in the feed here if you're curious. Otherwise, Alex, I guess we got to get on and talk candidates, unless you had anything else.
Let's kick on.
All right. So this is Wiretap's candidate number 1. Our first candidate this week has 9 schools on the target list. They're looking at Berkeley, Cambridge, Chicago, Harvard, INSEAD LBS, MIT, Wharton, and Stanford. They want to start school in the fall of 26, and they're thinking that they're going to get into like entrepreneurship or tech. I mean, I think initially they want to help tech companies. Maybe the entrepreneurial goals are more long-term. Pre-MBA, they've been working in strategy and operations at an AI startup. This candidate has a 695 on the GMAT. They have an 8.1 GPA out of 10. They're based in India. They have 2 years of work experience. They did reveal that they attended one of the IITs in India, which are the very best kind of technical institutes in that country. They want to land in California after business school. And they do mention that they started out as an architect, but they've ended up in a business strategy role in an AI company. So they actually, had majored in architecture, et cetera, but then they ended up, getting involved on the side in sort of hackathons and things like that. And they joined this AI startup where they've transitioned from sort of a research role to strategy. They're only 24, but they've got some pretty interesting responsibilities that they shared. They're already, kind of managing a $500,000 budget. And have delivered some interesting solutions, one of which was for a Fortune 500 client. So they also mentioned that despite that 695 on the GMAT focus, that they're going to take it again. They're trying to get above 700 on this test. And again, they want to post-MBA try to tackle what they say even the tech giants are struggling with, which is figuring out business strategy for a post-AI world. So they're hoping to work in some AI startups, solving some of the revenue and commercial challenges before transitioning into VC, again, with that focus being on AI. So Alex, you had some back and forth with this candidate. So I'd love for you to shed light on anything else they're curious to know or, anything else they shared and what you make of their chances.
Yeah, I mean, their goal is to, not their longer term goal, but their goal is to obviously get an MBA at the best school that they can, as soon as they can, to leverage what they've done thus far and propel them into probably a stronger ecosystem in Northern California, whatever it is, for tech, AI, for VC, et cetera, right? So that, to me, is their big picture goal. But I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, I'm not concerned that they're not smart enough. I mean, obviously their numbers stand for themselves. IIT, they've got a 695 GMAT. They're going to retake it, so they'll have a 705 or a 715, 20, whatever it is. It's going to be a great score. but my concern is, 2 years of experience. They're from India and they're applying in round 2. So I think, with the breadth of schools that they're targeting, that there'll be an offer somewhere. Let's hope so. I mean, they show lots of upside potential, but I would be quite firm in thinking that if they applied in round 1 next season, so they've got a bit more experience under their belts, et cetera, they can really show that impact and growth. They can get in round 1, and so forth. I think their options at the very best schools on their list are going to start opening up. I'm just worried that by rushing to start a top tier MBA, they're going to end up in a situation that isn't optimized for them. So that's my main concern, Graham. I have no doubt that this person has real good, strong potential, and I might be proven wrong. Maybe they will get an admit at one of the very top programs that they're targeting, but I'm a bit concerned about that. But that might then make us think, okay, they should apply this season in round 2, but with the understanding that they might need to come back as a reapplicant in round 1. My concern with that strategy is they may get admissions at some of the schools they're targeting and then take those admissions and not optimize, in terms of where they could be doing their MBA.
Yeah, it is an interesting case because it's a younger candidate with just a couple of years of experience. I'm less concerned about their GPA. They seem a little worried about that 8.1 out of 10. We know that the IITs are, tough programs, and just by getting into one of those programs, they've kind of put themselves in a very special kind of segment of the pool. So I'm less worried about that. Obviously, if they can get better than that 695 on the GMAT, terrific. But as you point out, round 2,
but the 695 is already an outstanding score. My point is a higher GMAT score is not going to compensate for less work experience.
Right.
They are two completely different metrics.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that they're, at the end of the day, I totally agree with you that, look, they may get into some of these schools in Europe that they have on their list, for instance, right? But they want to land and work in California. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't want to rain on their parade, but it's hard to go to live in California post MBA from Europe, especially if you're not an American citizen, right? So so I do worry. Now, on the other hand, I'm like, wow, if they were to work another year, they had some really cool outside activities, one of which was stand-up comedy. Yeah. There's some things here that really, like you're saying, could, with some seasoning, and could be a great candidate. So, imagine a scenario where they end up with a 7, like you said, a 715. They've got another year of experience. They apply next fall in the first round. You could see them, easily checking the box and getting into some top schools. So, I don't blame them for trying in round 2, but I am a little bit cautious here. We'll have to see how it goes for them.
Yeah, and hopefully they prove me wrong and they get into their very best school this season. But that's my only concern.
Yeah, and I will say one shout out. They have very rational kind of goals.
Yes.
Like, I like their work experience to date and the plans they have. The work experience isn't very long, but the plans they have make sense. And I understand the urgency. They want to get in, they want to get the MBA and get back into the workforce while the whole AI boom is kind of still happening. So in any event, interesting case. I wish them the best of luck in round 2, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. Our second candidate this week is applying to 10 schools. They've got Berkeley, Booth, Columbia, Duke, Harvard, Minnesota, Carlson, MIT, Kellogg, Wharton, and Stanford on the list. But they're not applying now. They're looking to start in the fall of 27. So they've got another year where they can work on their profile. They've been working in IT security with the local government. They're US-based. They are thinking about entrepreneurship, tech, and maybe even VC in the longer term post-MBA. They have a whopping 755 on the GMAT, and that is like, the equivalent to like a perfect score on the old exam. They have a 3.0 undergraduate GPA, which is a weak point, 2.5 years of work experience to date, They studied undergrad at Minnesota Carlson in the business school there, management information systems, where they had that 3.0 GPA. They mentioned that the GPA is low and they think that their work experience is mediocre at best, but they're hoping that the GMAT score will compensate. So you had some dialogue with this candidate as well, Alex, but what do you make of this situation?
Yeah, I mean, just take that phrase that you just stated, like mediocre work experience, a lower GPA. Will the GMAT compensate? Probably not at the very top schools, right? Mm-hmm. The GMAT will help compensate the 3.0 GPA, right? Mm-hmm. But not the shorter or, as they qualify, mediocre work experience. So, obviously expressing some context around a 3.0 GPA would be good. But to get a 755 GMAT, clearly they're super smart. So that's not going to be the problem. But typically, if you've got a really strong test score and a very mediocre GPA, then it's all about academic commitment. Are you committed to the academics? Because clearly you can do it when you put the effort in, and so forth. I'm not as convinced that the work experience is mediocre, however. I think, they're working in cybersecurity, which is becoming a more and more important field. As again, if you read any of the tech press, listeners would know that. They're also very interested in AI safety, which again, I was reading an article this morning about how OpenAI is in a legal wrangle with parents of a kid who committed suicide because, the ChatGPT coached them on how to do it, right? So these AI safety is super, super important. So these are really interesting topic areas that, and they're going to be working for another year before they apply. So they continue to sort of develop this sort of set of really interesting expertise. I think that's going to be super important. You didn't mention that their passion outside of work is esports.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In their case, it's Pokemon, mm-hmm. which I still haven't got my head around really what Pokemon is. But nevertheless, they've gone to and participated in world championships over several years. And I just think, whether it's sports or esports, if you are participating at the very top level, that says something really interesting about you and so forth. So I quite frankly think there's a lot to like about this candidate for next season. This 3.0 GPA is going to need to be sorted out or context provided, but yeah, kudos for them for getting the 755 GMAT. They had a question about letters of recommendation. They can't get a joint recommendation from the board. All recommendations need to come from individual folks. So yeah, just throw that out there. But yeah, quite frankly, Graham, aside from the 3.0 GPA, I think we've got a strong profile here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, the fact that they've got another year to work on this, I would probably recommend that they do something like, take a class or two, whether it's, I know they have a great GMAT score, but taking a class or two in their spare time, it could be online. It could be some of these extension schools that universities offer. We would just, if they could build like an alternative transcript with some A's, that would be a good sign to sort of, send the admissions committee to compensate for that low GPA. But yeah, I agree. Interesting hobbies, world championships with Pokemon TCG. Not sure what exactly that is. I know what Pokemon is, but it must be some kind of a game within Pokemon. But in any event, yeah. And I think you raised that really important issue with the board of managers. I guess they report to a board of managers and they're like, oh, maybe the whole board could write me a letter. But no, as you point out, it's got to be an individual. But yeah, there's a lot to like here. I think they just need to, they have time to work on some of these issues that they've got and get their ducks in a row to be very successful as they apply next fall to start the following.
Yeah, absolutely. All
right. So I want to thank them for sharing their profile. And yeah, I feel like, you had mentioned to me before we came on air, sometimes people underestimate themselves. And I do feel like, they shouldn't refer to their work experience as mediocre at best. I think they can, play it up and stuff. So in any event, we'll see how that goes for them. Let's move on and talk about...
I think that's typical though of a candidate that's coming coming out of a very good university, but not one of the Ivies or whatever, and, going into a career that's not, management consulting, fine, whatever, right? So they think that they're sort of on the back foot from the get-go. And the answer to that is you could still do great work, right? And still show the two things that I always focus on is growth and impact. So yeah, anyway, I'd go off on a tangent. I think this candidate, like you said, is underselling themselves. They do have to overcome this 3.0 GPA.
Yeah. So I want to wish them the best of luck. Let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 3. So our third candidate actually comes not from ApplyWire, but from DecisionWire. We've got someone who applied to Carnegie Mellon, Tepper, and Kellogg's one-year MBA offerings, these kind of accelerated programs, and they got into all three. They actually were offered some financial aid at each of the schools. So at Tepper, they've got a $52,500 scholarship. Emory, they've got $75,000, and at Kellogg, a $15,000 scholarship. They want to get into consulting after business school. They're located in India. In case you're curious, they have a 665 on the GMAT, and they state, I'm an international applicant, 5 years of consulting experience, and that's their first preference post-MBA is to get into consulting, or stay, I guess, in consulting. They said, given the current job market slowdown and financial considerations, they're struggling to decide between these 3 one-year MBA programs. Tepper's accelerated path offers the option to pursue an internship, extending the program to 16 months, otherwise it's 12. So, so what do you make of this, Alex? Oh, one other key tidbit is that they have a partner that they've applied with who also got an admit to Tepper's one-year program, but presumably doesn't have offers at the other schools. So, how do you decide on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there are two sort of driving influences to this final decision. The first is, partner aside, where would you go, right? Tepper versus Goizueta versus Kellogg. You want to get into consulting. I mean, all 3 programs provide you a pathway to consulting. There's no doubt about that. But, Kellogg is in the higher tier. Kellogg is known for consulting, placement, and so on and so forth. So you would have to think that Kellogg leads the way here. Scholarship aside, there's a little scholarship differential, but that's reflective of the tiers. But these are Kellogg's basically 2 tiers above Tepper and Goizueta, right? So I would place Tepper and Goizueta in that sort of top 20 tier, and Kellogg is in the M7 tier. So there is a significant difference here. That tilts, to me, quite clearly towards Kellogg, but then your partner is going to Tepper. So the importance of doing your MBA with your partner, I think, is significant, right? So to me, it's clearly going to be between Tepper and Kellogg in this case, even though Goizueta is great for consulting placement. And they're going to have to think long and hard about the opportunities of doing their MBA together versus some of the challenges of doing an MBA across 2 different cities, Pittsburgh and Chicago, which I assume are reasonably accessible to each other, but I don't absolutely know. But yeah, it's not a straightforward answer, I think, Graham.
Yeah, so I was very proud of myself because I took a very scientific approach to this, and I said, okay, let's look at placements and rank the schools in order, and we'll give them points. Like if you came in first place, you get 3 points, second place 2, third place 1 point, right? So I was like, okay, placements, Kellogg, then Emory, then Tepper for consulting placements, right? And then I was like, oh, what about money? How much money have they been given? Well, Emory comes in first. They're giving the biggest scholarship, then Tepper, then Kellogg. And then what about the partner? Well, Tepper would be first, then Kellogg, because as you say, Pittsburgh to Chicago is probably easier, and then Emory coming in last there. So then I tallied it up. And it turns out that each school gets 6 points. So my mathematical approach to this was a complete waste of time because, depending on how you look at it, you get these different outcomes. But in any event,
you didn't look at prestige
so if we
rankings. So if you lay that on top, then Kellogg wins.
Yeah. So if we add a thing for prestige, we'd probably go Kellogg, Tepper, Emory in terms of typical rankings that we see, across the years. And that would probably then put things into the Kellogg court. But obviously this person needs to decide, how important is it to have that year in the same city as their partner. And that may trump everything. I mean, those are important things, right? You can't discount that.
But there are advantages of being in two cities, right? So one, you focus a bit more on your studies and networking directly with your classmates rather than with each other. You've now got two alum networks to tap into versus one, etc., etc. So it's not all absolutely in favor of studying in the same city. So just bear that in mind too.
Yeah, I like the idea of two different networks and no distractions, just focus on your studies. So, yeah, I mean, it really, this is not an easy call. I mean, obviously the financial issue is one.
And regret. There's another one. Mm-hmm. I know Elliot, he focuses a lot on regret. It's like the idea that if you go to Tepper with your partner, would you ever sort of sideways look and say, well, what would have happened if I'd have gone to Kellogg?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
No, it's fair.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to congratulate this person on getting into all three programs and getting money at all three. Yeah. So, but best of luck as they try to make this decision. I don't know if we've muddied the waters or helped them, but hopefully this helps a little bit. Alex, we got to run. It's, as you pointed out, we're recording on Thanksgiving and we all got things to do. So let's put this one in the books and I'll connect with you next week and we'll be back for everybody.
Very good. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.